if I'm having meaningful experiences, and again, that's a very difficult to define term, but it's personal, right? This whole thing is personal. I think of the little kid that I was and how if I had ever dreamed of actually being able to go to any of those places, I just would have wanted to know that it's possible. Not that, no, you can't do that or that's not realistic. Sure, it might be very challenging. I don't have a how right now. How is it actually going to happen? Because that's too overwhelming. It's like when you have a goal that's very big, you don't want to think of the entire goal. You have to break it down into small pieces.
That is my buddy and today's guest, John McKenzie. You can learn more about him at johnthetraveler.com. We touch on, of course, a lot of themes related to travel, and one of the biggest, curiosity, something that binds all of us together as travelers, as humans, and the value of curiosity. We'll get into that. And John has been traveling to a lot of more off the beaten track countries, let's say, especially recently. You can't find a lot of information on some of these destinations. He talks about his approach to traveling to those types of places and just the mindset around that. Of course, he shares some of his favorite underrated destinations and regions of the world, including one I've had on my radar for a while, as you'll hear. And perhaps coming out of this one, a call to transition to a different style of travel for yourself. Who knows? All that coming and loads more in this episode. Buckle up, strap in. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast, my friend.
You're listening to the Zero to Travel podcast, where we explore exciting travel-based work, lifestyle, and business opportunities, helping you to achieve your wildest travel dreams. And now your host, world wanderer and travel junkie, Jason Moore.
Hey, it's Jason here with ZeroToTravel.com. Welcome to the show. Thanks for hanging out, letting me bring a little travel into your ears today. This is the show to help you travel the world on your terms, to fill your life with as much travel as you desire, no matter what your situation or experience. What does on your terms mean for this year, for yourself? That might be a good question to ask yourself. I'm going to ask myself the same. You know, our terms can change over time, of course, just like an athlete playing for a team or whatever, and they have to, get a new contract. What if we had a contract with ourselves, a travel contract? What would that look like? What would our new terms be? I don't know. Maybe some food for thought there going into this one with John McKenzie. John was also featured recently, I should mention, in the National Geographic Traveler's Atlas of the World. It's a book covering every country in the world, written by travelers who have been to the places they wrote about. And he can now say he's a published National Geographic author, which is really cool. And we'll link up to his website as well. Before we dive in, which we're going to in 1 second, don't forget zerototravel.com/newsletter is where you can get our free newsletter each and every week. And I will wrap this one up with a quote that I think ties it together nicely if you want to stick around on the back end for that. For now, please enjoy my conversation with John, and I will see you on the other side. What a pleasure to be here in person, nonetheless, with my buddy John McKenzie coming through Oslo, Norway. And welcome to Norway, man. How are you?
Thank you so much, Jason. I'm doing amazing.
We just met up like 45 minutes ago. You said you want to record a pod before we get too deep in these conversations, so we don't miss any of the good stuff. What is your main reason for wanting to do this? Like, what do you want people listening to kind of walk away with from this conversation? I think that's a good starting point because we've both known each other for some years. I'm going to dig into your backstory a bit, but I thought there's so much to talk about. I know you have this new goal of traveling to every country in the world. You've just done some writing for National Geographic, a lot of exciting things happening in your life. You're on a solo trip right now for a month through Scandinavia and some other countries. And there's a lot to unpack. And I just thought, well, let's start there so people can kind of get an idea of what to expect. And then we can sort of work backwards, learn a little bit more about your journey. And of course, along the way, I think some travel tips and some other things will come out, I'm sure, per the usual. So anyway, Welcome to the Zero to Travel podcast. I'm glad we're finally doing this. I'm going to throw my sweatshirt over to the other side of the room. What are you thinking, man?
Yeah, well, it's been quite a journey the past several years, but right now I am all in about my mission of curiosity. It's not a new concept, but for me, what I've noticed is even with people who travel a lot, not everyone approaches travel in the same way. I think people don't necessarily expand their range of what's possible when they travel.
Yeah.
And I'm here to try to expand and help them learn how to expand their mind a little bit when it comes to getting more curious.
Okay. I love that. So, yeah, curiosity, obviously a linchpin for travelers. And I think one of the main traits a lot of us have in common, curiosity about the world that's driving you to go see it. But it's interesting for me to hear that you know, even among the already curious travelers, which you were already, the idea that you can open that up even more. I wanted you to share a little bit more about that and how, maybe not exactly how you've personally done that, but maybe just some examples of how you've done that in your life recently. And then we can talk a bit about, you know, maybe some actionable stuff that's helped you along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been fairly curious, but I think like a workout, curiosity to me is a little bit like a muscle. You can strengthen it. There's ways to improve it. It can be expanded without even you realizing that it needs to be. And I think that's something that I've learned along the way. I certainly don't claim to have exercised my curiosity to the fullest extent, but it is something that guides me, not just in travel, but travel is the conduit that I'm using right now to share, you know, what I'm doing, but really in everyday life with everything. When I hear someone say they're bored, I think, oh, that's just misplaced curiosity, because there's always something more to learn, something more to do. And you just need to have a step that gets you closer to wanting to make that change, to do it or to explore it or to try.
Yeah.
Whether that's food or, you know, traveling to a new place or doing something slightly different in your routine, any of those types of things.
So boredom, kind of the thing that can ignite or open a door on a new thing that you're curious about in some ways. I remember a while ago I spoke with a musician here, and I was asking him about his creativity, and one of the things he said that was essential to his creativity was being bored. And at the time, this was years ago, I was a little confused by that. I was like, that sounds weird. But then I realized how right he was, because when I was growing up, when I was bored, I would find something to do, and then that would lead to the next thing and to the next thing and so on, because out of the boredom comes activity generally. If you're too bored, you're probably going to get moving at some point. But a lot of times in this day and age, people don't give themselves a chance to be bored because we got that lovely internet in our pockets all the time.
Yes.
But that's a whole other discussion. Yeah, I guess I'm just wondering for you, was there a time, kind of going back, was there a time where you felt like you were losing the curiosity you had growing up and you needed to sort of reclaim that for yourself? Is that where this mission came from or something?
I think it's a little bit more nuanced. I think for me to even have reached the decision that this is an official mission that I want to do.
Yeah.
I did have to go through some steps of, getting, I used to have my full-time job. During the pandemic was probably the lowest point where it felt like there was little avenue to exercise curiosity anymore. And then I realized I had to hit that low to kind of come back from that and say, wait a minute, there are some things I can do to be more curious, even though I can't travel. There's other things, and just taking some steps towards that, from looking into, okay, what do I really want my life to be like after having been to different conferences and events and listening to your podcast and everything. Just, I had to get some of that old thinking out of my own head. And maybe the boredom was part of that. The boredom that I didn't necessarily say, oh, I'm bored, but it was more of a lack of changing in the routine, which can be boring, and that caused me to rethink everything. Okay, what can I control here? I gotta do something to change what's happening.
Yeah.
And then that kind of kickstart a little bit of a spark that then led to the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah, going back to what you said in the beginning about it being a muscle, because I think that's a good a good lens through which to filter this conversation, because it can be that you take your curiosity for granted as a static thing, right? Like, I'm either a super curious person or I'm not, or, of course that ebbs and flows, right? But the idea that, if you get into a funk, you can just try to open that up or unlock it a bit more. That can be a powerful tool. How do you do that? Was it locking in on, and I know this isn't everybody's sort of way of being, so I'm respecting everybody who's listening and their sort of approaches, but for some people, it helps to have a singular mission, whether it's your own personal quest. In your case, it sounds like you've landed on this quest to go to every country in the world. We've been to Chris Guillebeau's events, and he talks about quests. He wrote a whole book about it. And for some people, that is the thing that's like the anchor that can fuel the curiosity, I suppose. Maybe for some people, it's more broad than that, just like wanting to travel or maybe take a year off or something like that. It doesn't have to be some grandiose goal. And then also you boiling down the mission of just honing in on curiosity from that's another standpoint, I guess. For you, it sounds like that might be something that's been helpful for unlocking even more modalities of curiosity, let's call it. But what are some other ways through your conversations, through kind of your life experience that because it sounds like you've thought about this quite a lot, this subject of curiosity, as it relates to travel specifically as well.
Yeah, and I think for me, I've had to go through a number of steps to reach this point even, and it's still evolving as we speak.
It's always a messy journey, right? Yeah.
But I will say it was really that Camp Indy, the first Camp Indy, where we had a small group. It was kind of in between two waves of the pandemic, and the first.
Just to clarify for people, that was an event I co-founded, but it's no longer running. But it was like an adult summer camp, basically, with some talks and different things happening. I just wanted so people have some context. Yeah.
And I met who later became my coach there. Yeah. And that's where the discussions with him led to me realizing that my mission and my core is curiosity, because it was something that I didn't really think about in the same way before. I knew I was curious, but it wasn't like I went around saying, I'm Mr. Curiosity.
You weren't championing it as a cause. Yeah.
And so it was working with the coach to get me to kind of peel back my own layers and realize that was at the core of who I am and what I do. And then that helped open the door to making it a little bit more mission driven, so that I could say, okay, well, what do I want to do? I really want people I want to encourage people. I want to promote the idea of curiosity through travel, because I love to travel. I travel differently than other people do. I've been told this. To me, it's just the way I travel. But when I'm traveling, whether it's solo or with my partner or with someone else, I just seem to have a different outlook on how I navigate where we're going. And that is something that I needed to actually get other people to travel with me and tell me what I'm doing differently. And I don't know if it's something tangible as much as just the way I move from place to place and point out things that other people just wouldn't necessarily think of themselves.
Can you give an example?
Just, for example, looking for murals in a side street in Mexico City doesn't sound like rocket science, and some people do look for things like that. But for me, going maybe 3 blocks out of the way to find this little nestled in the side streets alleyway that has all these colorful murals, and I could see the other people see the murals and say, oh, wow, I never would have found this if you hadn't showed us. And that told me that, okay, yeah, it's not brain surgery that I'm doing here, but it's taking things that I'm interested in, art, architecture, things like that, and just incorporating that into what I do, looking at places to go eat local food, not chain restaurants, looking for something unique, looking for cultural experiences that aren't the most touristed things to do. And of course, there are some things that are going to be worth doing that are popular, and that's okay. It's just I like to mix it up with other things that
aren't necessarily getting the headlines.
Yeah.
Or where do you find those things generally when you're doing research?
I really use Google. Yeah. I mean, it's simple, but I use Google a lot and look at the little icons that they show for different things. And sometimes that sparks another thing, like, oh, what's next to this? Or maybe I'll map a couple things out on Google Maps, and then I'll physically go there and plan to go from point A to point B. But maybe on the way, I discover some other things that I didn't plan on. Or, I'm crossing the street and I see some other mural across the street, or maybe I hear church bells. And so I'm like, oh, there's a church there. Let me go see if there's something interesting to find there. And occasionally there'll be an event, a little street celebration, or maybe there's a whole street closed that wasn't on the map. Yeah. And those are the kinds of things that if I can't plan that, at least I try to be open to it. And that's really the point that I'm trying to make, is that to be open to curiosity, to be open to serendipitous moments, by definition, you can't plan for serendipity, but you can plan to be open to it without having a schedule that's so rigid that you're like, at 9:00 I'm doing this and at 10:00 I'm doing this. That might be necessary in some cases, but for the most part, that limits your ability to then be flexible to do something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the stuff that I've found in my travels that have then reinforced to me that when you're open to those serendipitous moments or to the things that you can't plan for, they tend to be the most memorable or the most cherished. I mean, you can go to Machu Picchu and it fits your vision of what it looks like. You had a great time. You've got some great pictures, but the other set of ruins that you really didn't even give 2 seconds thought of, it's just on the way. So, okay, I'll check it out. And then you have a more memorable experience because on the way up to those ruins, you passed by a local woman selling some local fire water, and then you hear another group of kids speaking Spanish and you kind of understand a little Spanish if you're like me. And those are the kinds of examples of things that just stick in my mind.
Sure.
Even though, of course, the main focus of the trip, in this case to Peru, was about Machu Picchu.
Yeah.
But it's those other things that tend to stick in my mind because I don't have expectations set around the things I can't plan for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, those are the best moments for sure, I think, or some of the most memorable at least. It seems to me that you have been going to visit a bit more, let's say, off the beaten path countries semi-recently. And some countries that people might say, or the average traveler might say, are quote unquote dangerous, or the media perception is that they're dangerous, or they are dangerous. And you need some help going through them in terms of a handler, or, going with a group or something like that. And part of the every country quest, of course, isn't, the easy part's coming to Norway, right? Here we are. It's a lovely day. We have all the accoutrements of Western society and, fairly easy country to visit and all that kind of stuff. But some of the other countries that are more challenging, it seems like to me that you have been visiting those places a bit more. Yeah, I guess you can just share a couple of the places you've been, or maybe the first one where you felt like you were pushing your comfort zone as a traveler, and why you decided to do that. And I would love to hear any advice you have for anybody listening who wants to visit some of these places that we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so that's been another evolution of mine. I've never really said in my mind that I didn't want to go to anywhere, but it also didn't occur to me that I could go to so many places until
Right, well, like, you mean that, yeah, you're curious, so of course you want to go everywhere, but that you just assumed some places were going to be off limits.
Yes, or, I can't go because it's too dangerous, because it's too expensive, because for, whatever reason. And there's a lot of places. So but when I went to an event that I had heard about, called the Extraordinary Travel Festival, and then met people who have been to every country and who are going, and they are from all over the world, from all walks of life, all different abilities, everything. I just felt like, it suddenly became accessible to me.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't really have anybody telling me I couldn't go, it was a bit of a mindset thing.
Sure.
I just, maybe it was also overwhelming because I hadn't been to as many as, haven't been to that many compared to how many countries there are.
But you see them from all walks of life, and they're just people too, and they've done it, and you can do it too.
Just being able to have a conversation with them, and like they're fairly normal people, and they just love to travel, and
fairly normal.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I know I joke because I think we all joke with each other about how anyone that wants to go to places like some of the more off the beaten track countries in Central and Western Africa, it's not your everyday vacation. And I think for a lot of us, it's not necessarily a vacation, the way people use that term. But after going to that event and then meeting up with other travelers, which is also part of it, going alone maybe to some of these places is a little intimidating because I don't necessarily have as much travel experience to go to some of those really challenging places.
Share a couple places where you felt that.
So, I jumped right in and I went to Ethiopia and Somalia and Eritrea, which before would have been intimidating for sure. Somalia I would never have thought of going, but Somaliland, which is this unrecognized country in the north part of the Horn of Africa, and that has a better reputation for some travel, for hardcore travelers to go to. It's just out of the way, and I thought, well, I could go there, but even that was pushing it, just because I didn't know anybody else outside of this travel community that had ever gone there or even heard of it.
Sure.
So I planned this trip in that region, and then I found another traveler from Portugal who was interested in going, but he wanted to go to Mogadishu. And I was thinking, that's like a real dangerous place. There's actual threat of terrorism, like, that's beyond just the quote unquote danger that you hear on the media. But it took me a while to think about. I started doing a lot of research, and I found that there were a lot more of these extreme travelers who were going there. It was a 2-day trip is usually the typical amount of time that people go there. And I decided to just take the risk. I mean, to be honest with you, it was a risk. I weighed the outcomes, and I noticed that they had not had as many terrorist attacks there for a while, and I felt comfortable enough to just go for it. And it was fine. That was my experience. That doesn't mean that there wasn't still a threat. There's been some incidences since then, but the overall risk and statistically of something happening when, in the 2 days that you're there, there's not that many people that go there still. If you compare the odds to just getting your wallet stolen walking down the street in your hometown, it's still there. So I think it's those kinds of things that I just put into perspective, but ultimately I just made a decision and decided to go do the thing. But the other places that I thought might be more dangerous were really not. Eritrea isn't dangerous at all. It's just more challenging to get the visa, perhaps. There's not available internet, so you're going to be a little cut off. But I
see that as a big pro.
It was actually quite nice. I went to cafes, and they had these old movie theaters that the Italian, in the 1930s, the Italians had. It was an old Italian colony. It was supposed to be Mussolini's African jewel back in the day. And so they built all of these movie theaters that now are coffee shops. And people are just sitting and having coffee and talking. It was like going back to the 40s, and I loved it. And the food is really good because it's like Ethiopian style food and Italian food there as well. So it's a really, I just found it to be a very pleasant experience. But that was just one example of a place that just doesn't have a lot of information.
Yeah.
If you Google it, sometimes there's a phrase, the North Korea of Africa. And sure, the government maybe has some people would not agree with how they are, but I try not to get into that when I travel because I'm not their government and I'm only visiting. I try to reserve my judgments for all of that and focus on the people because that's really where it's at. And I had wonderful experiences with the people that I met there. Another example more recently was this year I went to both Cuba and to Syria and Lebanon. And I felt the need to go to those places just because of how things are changing, both in Syria, which just underwent a massive liberation in December. And I felt like if I don't go soon, it's going to change even more. And I wanted to see the history unfold in front of me. And that's what happened. It was amazing to see it. I did go with a group because I felt a little out of my element again. And for me, that was a good call because with a guide who kind of knows the country and can tell you, oh, this area is not safe to go to, we're going to skip that and go to another place.
Sure.
And then I met other travelers who had been in this extreme travel community and felt like we really connected as well. So now I feel like I have a lot more connections to potentially go to other countries, or if I don't go with them, I know that they've been to some of these places like Iraq or Afghanistan, that when I go, then I can rely on some of the information and guides and tips and things like that. So it's this community aspect that I've tapped into that has really opened the door for me, because now I feel like I'm not searching blind on the internet for information. I actually know people who have been to these places. I know people that have been there recently. So, because things change so fast that it's good to get on the ground information. And at any given time, there's somebody in this community in just about any given country in the world.
Yeah. That's, well, anybody listening, whether it's a goal like going to every country in the world or some other goal, I think that the community aspect, like you said, there's one thing about reading a blog or listening to a podcast or reading something on Google, but getting around people and developing relationships and being consistently around people who are maybe chasing similar goals or kind of in the similar world, even if you're not part of that world yet, just getting around those people, I think, normalizes it and makes you realize it's possible. And then, of course, you have the back end stuff with the resources and the knowledge and stuff that comes with that through the relationships and all the stuff you were just alluding to. But that initial normalization of something that seemed so ridiculous and impossible, sometimes that can take years, but even just putting yourself around those people initially, you might, like a stupid example, you might have a goal to have a YouTube station and have 1 million subscribers or something, which sounds insane. And you have never filmed anything and you have 0 subscribers, but you go to some place or an event and you get around other people doing it. That can kickstart the journey, and the normalization in your head is so powerful because it just opens things up in a way that's sometimes indefinable.
Yeah, and this whole notion of going to every single country, I'm in my lower 50s and trying to do the math, and while I'm still somewhat functional, it seems a little overwhelming to imagine, that means I have to go to this many countries a year, whatever. But then I think I've had to I'm not focusing on that. I'm not trying to race. I'm not trying to beat anybody in a competition about it. It's more just, I don't have any more limits of places I want to go, and why not try to see every country? Because I grew up collecting stamps since I was 6 years old, and I know all of these places. I feel like I know them like in a way that
this is like a natural evolution to what you were exploring as a child. In some ways.
It's like I want to connect the piece from the stamps that I used to see as a child to the current real situation of the country today. Mm-hmm. And there's some places that I wouldn't go right now. Yeah. Or that we're not allowed to go right now. Yeah. But things change. When I was young, there were some countries that were completely open and no problem. Not so much now. Same thing the other way. There were places that you couldn't go that now are open.
Sure.
Sierra Leone, for example, is on my list. I'm hoping to get to next year because a lot of the travelers that have been there have said it's just an amazing place, but you don't hear much about it. And if you did know anything about it, most people have heard of the Blood Diamonds. That was a movie that was popular in the 90s maybe. But so it's the reputation of some of the countries that it's the only time that some people have ever heard of these places. So that is all they have to associate with it. Yeah. And so that stays for a very long time. I think Mexico is another example of one that is much more familiar to people. I don't know how many times when we were going to Mexico last year, people would say, danger, like they're going to harvest your kidneys.
And you're based in the USA, and there's a lot of, unless you're going to the resorts, there can be a lot of that type of feedback.
Right. And, there's definitely, can any of those things happen? It could happen. Anything could happen anywhere. And I think just being...
I could harvest your kidneys right after this conversation. I mean, you just don't know. Anything can happen.
I just don't
worry,
live.
I'm not going to harvest your kidneys. If I did, though, that would be, they could take this exact clip and that could be the beginning of the true crime series all about All right, sorry, that got dark. Don't worry, I'm just going to feed you dinner. I'm not going to harvest your kidneys. No, I think I know, we went off grid there. I appreciate your approach to the goal because it seems like it's well-intentioned. And, just to be honest, and this is not anything personal against you, I'm always a bit skeptical of the every country people, even though I'm friends with some of them. And I admire it as a goal, and like hearing your approach and like our buddy Gunnar and, people, I feel like I'm not the moral arbiter of travel and every country goals. I could say, oh, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. There's so much nuance to it. But, I do feel like there's probably a subset of this community where it's very ego driven and kind of like, I'm going to put my feed on every, and it's just like, and then I hear, some of the downsides to me, like I understand that situation where there's terrorism and, typical trip is 2 days, but then in 2 days, do you really see much, and there's that side of it. And this isn't me like calling you out or anything. This is just,
no, it's a valid point.
It's just like a honest conversation. I know we were talking about it on the way over here, like one of the downsides of kind of, what tends to happen with a lot of people chasing the goal is they'll get to a region of the world where they see the countries are packed tight together. And then like, oh, I have an opportunity to tick off 5 or 6. And then it becomes like this sort of thing that you can do. Now, to be fair, when I was like younger traveler, that's exactly what I wanted to do around Europe. I wanted to go to this country and that country. I want to explore them all. So I've been there. I get it. But then I see the every country goal as such a multi-year thing. Do you ever question that? Like, is that a way you actually want to design your travels? Is that the best use of your money? And this question isn't at all an attack because I already prefaced it. I think that you have great intention and it comes through with the way you explain it. But this is more for like anybody listening, if they're considering this or if, some other bigger goal like that, like you do have to ask yourself the question, unless you have unlimited resources financially, is this the best way to travel and the best use of my money? That, again, it's not like, it's so hard to say that because it's not in, you're not like, oh, I'm going to invest a certain amount in travel so I can get this return back. That's not how it works. And so that's a part of it too, in favor of, you're just kind of having experiences. But yeah, I just want to hear your thoughts on all that.
Yeah, no, totally valid because, I think that's why it took me this long to, formally commit to the goal.
Yeah.
And I'm also, I can change my mind. There's
sure.
no, I'm, like I said, I'm not trying to be the first or fastest or slowest or,
right. You're not trying to set a record or anything. You're just a guy who wants to see the world.
But I also realize exactly what you said. Like this trip, I'm only here in Norway for a few days. And is that, have I done Norway? Well, I've lived in the Washington, D.C. area for almost 25 years, and it's embarrassing some of the stuff that I have not yet done.
Sure.
So have I
that
truly
happens at home. Right.
Yeah,
It's a great point. Yeah.
I think it's just what I settled on is if I'm having meaningful experiences, and again, that's a very difficult to define term, but it's personal, right? This whole thing is personal. But I also want people to realize, I think of the little kid that I was and how if I had ever dreamed of actually being able to go to any of those places, I just would have wanted to know that it's possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not that, no, you can't do that or that's not realistic. Sure, it might be very challenging. I don't have a how right now. How is it actually going to happen? Because that's too overwhelming. It's like when you have a goal that's very big, you don't want to think of the entire goal. You have to break it down into small pieces. And I see this as a lifelong project. I don't necessarily have a date range of when I expect to be complete with it. Like that's not what this is about. It's more just a formal declaration of, no, I'm not going to limit myself. I'm going to attempt to keep going until, and when I say until I'm out of country, so to speak, that doesn't mean that in between or even after that of course I would still go back to other places. I would want to go back to, I don't think there's any place that I've been that I would say I'll never go back there.
Yeah.
I might choose to go to other places in favor of going back to some other places. But there are so many things to see in the world, and it's not just places, it's also time, and the place changes, you change as a person, technology changes the way we interact with the world. I was in Bangkok in the fall, and I hadn't been there for 24 years. Of course, it changed a lot in 24 years. The last time I was in Bangkok, I had a camera where I had to develop film.
Mm-hmm.
I probably have more photos from the few days here in Norway than I did on the entire 8 months of Southeast Asia trip because I had film. So things like that change. And I'm looking at this more as just a new reframe of how I'm visualizing. It makes me excited. I'm like, oh, I could go, there's all of these places to go to. I don't have to carve out this and that, or
you don't have to restrict yourself.
Yeah.
I get it. I think that, thank you. Because I just wanted to play a little bit with that other side of it. But, the reality is when you're looking at this in this way, where you're just talking about experiences, the whole thing is an experience, right? The experience of even, not just like the on-the-ground travel experience, because that's the one that's so evident and so obvious, but the experience of embracing a big goal and opening yourself up for that, the life experience of that. I was picking on the trip with the 2 days thing just as an example, but the reality is the experience of going to a place that puts you completely out of your comfort zone, making that decision, doing it, all of that is part of the experience. It's the decision making in the front end, the takeaways on the back end, not just the on the ground thing. So you could say, well, they only went to, they only did this and that. It doesn't really matter because you can't just chunk out the experience without factoring in the rest of it. And this isn't a goal for everybody, but for some people it is. And to me, it's really cool to hear your thought process behind it. It sounds like for you, it's been really thought out in terms of like how the travel experience will be, but you're also embracing, you're getting the other aspects of this experience of having this mission and taking on the goal and things like that, which involves growth and everything outside of just the travel portion. And then there's of course some of the challenges you face in getting the finding the answers and getting the visas and all. And some people really enjoy that part of the process too, the problem solving aspect, because there's the logistical aspect and things like that. So there's just so many parts to this, but I just wanted to try to cover all sides.
Yeah.
I think we did.
Well, and I think you having the multi-layered or multi-faceted experiences, and I've had each of these trips that I've taken this year has been a different type of trip, and I've learned something different that may be a little harder to identify, but I've maybe learned something about, I really liked what happened on this trip. I would like to try to do that more. Or I packed really well for this one trip, and I don't, packing is not one of my favorite things, but I did a pretty good job on one of these trips. And so I learning things along the way, and then also being able to change it up, because I might want to slow travel. I might want to spend an entire month in, a smaller, off the beaten track kind of place, and just,
if you're able to do that and let go of the goal of, just like, I could be, I could have used this time to see this, and this, or you're just like, yeah, if you're able to let that go, then you really, you can have your cake and eat it too, I guess.
And I've traveled. I mean, I spent, I guess it was 4.5 months several years ago in Southeast or Central Asia, and I was in Tajikistan for a full month. And that was still one of the most adventurous, like crazy in that every day I did not know what the day had in store for me. And every day was almost something just, unexplainable that it would happen, or it was just so much, it was like, okay, if I wanted to say what trip made me feel the most alive, it might have been that one, just because there was so much going on, and there were a lot of different events that happened. And now that could happen in a multi-country trip too, but I definitely didn't feel that I wasted my time for a month in one place, because that was such a defining moment in my travels that kind of made me think differently about how I wanted to travel.
Okay.
I think it was...
Why? What was it? One specific thing?
A few subtle things, but the one thing that always comes back to me is just because I was so remote, I ended up meeting a lot of people, local people, and the language barrier was real. There wasn't a lot of communication. I didn't have Google Translate back then, but I had just a few words in a couple languages that I would use, and that was enough. And people communicate with a kind of an international body language, offering you tea, allowing you to come into your home, and smiles. And as simple and maybe undramatic as that sounds, it really made me think more about people, the experiences that I have meeting the local people, than just, seeing this amazing mountain or this building, which are going to happen anyway. But it's the people part that you can't really predict or plan to. You can try to seek out specific people, I suppose, but again, it's usually those unexpected moments that really capture you. And that's, I think, what made me think that was what the most memorable part of the trip was those interactions with all of these people who maybe had rarely seen travelers, at least then. And it just stuck with me and made me think I would like to see more of that. And so having had those experiences again in different ways in different countries, I just think it's going to continue. I think that's, again, another bigger or ulterior motive of this is to showcase that as much as we are different, most people in these countries, they just want to have a good life, and they're mostly nice and they're mostly friendly. And I found that's been true for me, and I want to show that is a reality for most people.
Yeah. So it's interesting too how the goal can shape where you go in terms of the sense of urgency to get to a place before it may close up, or if it's going in a certain direction. That's another element to that we hadn't talked about, but I'm bringing it up because I wanted to ask you about places. I know that trip was a while ago. Maybe it's on your list. I just wanted to hear a few, based on the places you've been, a few of your, I don't want to say favorites because that's always hard, but a few that you would recommend to listeners here who love to find some of the either up and coming or, places that most people aren't thinking about that maybe that should get on their radar, or maybe it's a known place, but it's just so worth visiting that, you're going to put it on your list. I just wanted to hear a few of your destination recommendations.
Yeah, July, I came back from a month in Southern Africa, and I think that is one of the regions that, even though people have maybe heard of Victoria Falls, and the area around there, it's really one of the most bang for your buck kind of places, especially if there's listeners that maybe have never been to Africa, but it's been on their mind. I know a lot of people are interested. They're curious about going to Africa, but Africa has a lot of, it's overwhelming for a lot of people. There's a lot of different facets of it. But Victoria Falls is such it's touristy, but without being super touristy. It has some infrastructure in place that will allow people to feel comfortable when they get there. And within only a few hours, you can go see wild animals in Botswana. You can go across into Zambia. And of course, there's the falls. There's a lot of different activities surrounding the falls and the nature areas there. And it just has a lot of options for a first time in Africa. For some place a little bit more off the beaten track, also in the region, is Malawi. And Malawi, just most people don't know too much about it, but it's a relatively small country that is mountainous. There's lots of rock paintings from thousands of years ago. There's a beautiful lake. There are a lot of authentic African experiences that you can have. So it's kind of a bit of a miniature version of Africa that you can get an experience. And the people are so nice and very warm, smiles and friendly. And it's, at least for North American audiences, it's fairly affordable. I would also say Cuba. And Cuba's an interesting one because a lot of Americans don't realize that we are, at least right now, allowed to go, but there are some stipulations in going that you have to be aware of. You don't go as a tourist, you go to support the Cuban people. And really that just means not staying in hotels that are owned by the government, not using government services, and actually trying to get to know the Cuban people. So I stayed at Airbnbs, and those people who own the Airbnbs, or Casa Particular, that's the name of the Airbnb equivalent, and they can arrange everything for you. So, and you're actually following the U.S. government's mandate to support the people, especially if you bring supplies. I brought a suitcase full of things I got from the dollar store, and they were so grateful. I found someone to help distribute that, and I just felt like I was there not just to learn more about Cuba, about the people, about what they've been through and what's going on there, but also seeing some amazing countryside. And Havana is a really interesting city, and of course there's all the old cars. So it's really and it's close to the U.S. So that's definitely one I would suggest at least looking into. And there's certainly places like that are maybe not difficult or not far away, but they're underrated. I would say the smaller countries of Europe. I always like a good micronation. I had a great time in Liechtenstein. Most people just would not even spend a full day there, but I went several years ago, but I decided to make it like a birthday trip, and it was just a microcosm of a little European country, and there's I was researching going
because I thought it'd be fun if my daughter and I walked across a country together, and you can do that there in some hours, I think.
Yeah. Well, there's plenty of places that I have not yet been to that I would love to get more people to go, that are on my radar for probably for next year. El Salvador is one. Sierra Leone I mentioned. I would say Eastern European countries, the Balkans, those are places that are still much more affordable than Western Europe, but yet a lot of people are still not really sure They don't necessarily know all the countries there in the Balkans, but there's a lot more. It's changing a lot too. I think it's going to get more popular as Western Europe becomes more expensive, and also they're kind of over touristed, so they're not wanting a lot of tourists to come. So I hate promoting places so much that I don't want them to become another over touristed place, but I think that's really the point. Is the world is so big, and yes, there's places to see that are worth seeing, that is why they're touristy, but there's just so many other places to go that I think we can spread it out and it doesn't have to be overcrowded.
Yeah, agreed. Well, that kind of dovetails nicely into your new project. You mentioned trying to get some people together to go on some trips. Do you want to share where people can find more information about what you're putting together? And then if you want to talk about this National Geographic book that may or may not be on shelves when you're listening to this, but these things are always available for either pre-order or order, depending on when. But you want to let people know?
Yeah, so I wanted to get people to see how I travel and to be more curious. So I created these things called CuriosiTrips, and we started our first one in Mexico City. So we're having another one in January 15th to the 20th, 2026. But I'm also planning to have another one in Washington, D.C., and I'm hoping to do a Cuba one. But all of that information you can find on my website, johnthetraveler.com, and I'll hope to open some more up, in the coming year. And I'm certainly open to suggestions from anybody that wants to go someplace that maybe wants to go with a bunch of curious travelers.
Nice. And the book?
And the book, yes. So I took a chance and submitted. National Geographic was looking for people that had actually been to some different countries. They were putting a book together of every country in the world, and I answered a call for that, and I had been to a few, and I sent them, and they accepted for 3. So I wrote 3 chapters in a book about every country in the world, and that will be coming out in November.
Wow.
And so, pre-orders are available, but it might be out. It's called The Traveler's Atlas of the World.
Congratulations, man. Exciting stuff. Excited. Yeah, we'll link up to all that. I'm going to let you go so we can go have some dinner and hang out a bit. But what a pleasure it has been to have you here recording this. Do you want to share any final thoughts, a takeaway, a challenge, anything you want to give people on their way out of this one?
Always try to do one thing when you travel on your trip. Just do one thing that's a little bit outside of your comfort zone. A little bit makes you, I don't know about that. Like trying a new food, trying to speak the language, taking the local transportation, things like that. Just start there and keep doing that for your trips. And then I promise that will be a gateway to a richer, deeper experience, not just for you, but for the people you're interacting with. Because I think one thing as travelers that we have a duty to share where we're from and our own personal humanity with the people that we're interacting with. And I don't know how many times I've met people, they ask where I'm from. I always tell them I'm from the U.S. I've never had anyone had any problems with that, because I think a lot of Americans get a little nervous about that.
I've had people have problems with it. And back in the day.
I think it's possible. I'm not saying that nobody will, but I will say if you're honest and own it and just try to showcase, like, you're not like maybe the stereotype that they're thinking
You're
about.
always sort of a mini ambassador for your country, whether you like it or not.
And, just be kind and be open and try something different, try something new. And also that means with where you go, what you do, and not just traveling, in your everyday life. Mix up your routine, take the long way to get home from work, try a new food, just do things like that that will help exercise your curiosity muscle. And then when you're ready for the next challenge, then it'll be a lot easier.
Cool. Thanks, man. Pleasure to know you and a pleasure to record this. Let's high five it out. Always can do that in person. And we'll see you soon. Come back to Norway soon.
Thank you.
All right, buddy. There you have it. Thank you to John McKenzie for taking the time to stop on over, have some dinner, record a podcast, and just hang out. It was really cool. Don't forget to check him out at johnthetraveler.com. And I want to leave you with this quote. Of course, I had to hone in on curiosity, a topic that is near and dear to my heart in many ways, something I think about and something that I think is one of my main goals as a parent and perhaps as a podcaster as well, to spark the curiosity, be the provider of the spark, and encourage the exploration. Fan the flames, if you will. I think following your curiosity has led me to so many wonderful places in my own life. And although at times that can feel like following a map where you don't know where you're going to end up, of course, that is the joy of it. And I find that the more I follow my curiosity, the more it always leads me to good things. So, even though we embark into the unknown when we follow our curiosity at times, let it take you where it's going to take you. Perhaps if you're a visual thinker like me, you can just think of a map that, has some unknown destinations around it, but there's a line of you following your curiosity, and at the end of that line, it just says good things. I feel like it always leads to good things. And if not, you are at least enjoying the journey, right? If you're following your curiosity, you're interested in something, you're at least stimulated, perhaps intellectually, you're having fun, whatever it is. I mean, you can't go wrong with following your curiosity. So let that one take you where it may. Today, I'll leave you with this quote from E.E. Cummings, who said, "Once we believe in ourselves, we can risk curiosity, wonder, spontaneous delight, or any experience that reveals the human spirit." Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time. Peace and love to you and yours. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by ZeroToTravel.com. Ideas and advice to make your travel dreams a reality.